Welcome to Musings and Modalities. I'm your host, Tristen Stawicki. Think of me as your pragmatic shaman bestie. Join in with other high-vibe, lovely people as I unravel spiritual ideas to help create change and growth in your life. I cover a variety of spiritual topics, sharing knowledge to meet you wherever you are in your journey. As a shaman, astrologer, and human design reader, I help you understand how to make informed decisions and incorporate different modalities using discernment in your own intuition. Today, you will gain powerful shamanic healing tools you can use to incorporate spiritual practices in non-traditional ways. Whether you're just beginning or need a knowledgeable best friend with the next phase of your journey, I'm here to help. Stay tuned. Musings and Modalities starts now. Hey everyone, and welcome to Musings and Modalities. I'm Tristen Stawicki, your pragmatic shaman bestie, and for the next 30 minutes, we'll be diving into an astrology-focused episode where we'll talk about transits, squares, and trines. These are commonly used terms in astrology that I want to help define and help really orient you to so that you'll have a deeper understanding of how the astrological weather report we have currently and we have in the future can impact your day-to-day. In this episode, I'll also kind of highlight the astrology for the end of 2024. Your birth chart, or your natal chart, as it's often referred to, uses the exact time, place, and date of birth that really provides a map of where the planets, moon, and key asteroids were at the moment of your birth. It acts as a celestial snapshot of this very specific moment. And planets and other celestial bodies move, right? They're not stagnant in the sky. And depending on how much time has passed and their specific movement pattern, there can be vast differences in where the planets were for your birth and where they've moved into, especially this year. And this movement can really create favorable or less than favorable conditions for things at a macro level, right? At the human collective level, things like scientific breakthroughs, the rise of technology, reconnecting with the natural world. And it can also create kind of favorable or less than favorable conditions for the very human level experience at the micro level. And that's your experience on Earth on a given day or week, or even a longer period of time, like months to years, can really be shaped by this celestial influence. And this movement is called a transit, right? And transiting planets and learning what influence is coming up in your life and perhaps what events are likely to happen during this time is very helpful and supportive. This knowledge provides an awareness, and hopefully there are like less events that blindside you or you don't feel as prepared for as you're able to really track the transits overall. And transits are incredibly helpful for your healing journey and your experience of being a divine being in a human body. So I wanted to start with the fun kind of personal transits that we all celebrate each year, which is your sun transit, your solar return. And specifically, this is the point where the sun crosses the exact degree where it was in your chart on the day of your birth. And for me this year, my solar return was 2 days after my actual birthday, and it can shift a bit each year, right? But it's pretty close to your birth date. And a sun transit and the experience of that time is really being able to shine. It can feel as though there's a spotlight on you that recognizes your achievements, and really you're applauded for what you've accomplished. Ultimately, it's a very supportive energy that should be warm and easy to move through. And there are personal transits for all of the planets as well as the moon. And the time it takes for a return to the exact degree of your birth chart is much longer for the planets that are further away from Earth and slower moving, like Pluto and Neptune. Within your birth chart, each of the houses have kind of a segmentation overall. And within each house, there are 0 to 29, almost 30 degrees, really, is how we speak about it. And for me, my exact kind of degree of where the sun was in Pisces is at 8 degrees. And so when I'm kind of looking at that as an astrologer, when I'm doing birth chart readings, I will always kind of track what upcoming personal transits you have. And so that way you have an awareness of it overall. Collective transits are a little bit different, right? The shift really is to focus on the individual planet's movement from one astrological sign to another. And though degrees do matter as you go into more and more nuance and as you get into especially things like mundane astrology, for the purposes of this episode, I really want to focus a little bit higher level. So for instance, you've been on the internet at all over the past few weeks. There's a lot of discussion about Pluto's move from Capricorn into Aquarius. And there's a lot of speculation of what this means for all of us on Earth, especially since Pluto moves very, very slowly and changes signs very infrequently, right? In our entire lifetime, it will only change signs a few times, maybe like 3 to 4 times max. Like it's very, very slow. To kind of drive home that sense of scale, the last time that Pluto shifted signs was in 2008, from Sagittarius into Capricorn. And I'll speak more about my personal thoughts on this shift at the end of the episode, where I'll cover the end of year astrology for 2024. Collective transits have a very personal impact as well. So we all have all of the zodiac energies in our chart, right? We all have Aquarian energy in our chart. We all have Pluto in our chart. It's a generational planet, which means the people around the time that you were born in that year, couple years, like 2 or 3 years, you likely all have the same kind of generational impact, depending on like which of the outer planets. So to work with a larger scale transit with an outer planet is to really see which house in your birth chart the zodiac sign is triggered in. So I almost imagine it when I'm looking at a birth chart and you can kind of see the pie with all 12 houses. It's like, what's lighting up with this transit? What's kind of being highlighted? And within my chart, Aquarius is in my seventh house of partnerships, relationships, and the type of people you keep closest to you. And each of the 12 houses have their own vibe, right? Their own flavor that they bring to the birth chart. And so when I layer in what my seventh house means, the energy of Aquarius, as well as Pluto's influence, right? We're always layering in a birth chart. We're taking all of kind of the data points to see what the overall influence and vibe of that section of your chart is, as well as how it works with other elements. And Pluto's influence as it shifts into Aquarius means that this area of my life, relationships and partnerships, and the type of people I keep closest, will really be up for review. And that will involve deep reflection, shifts, a lot of shadow work in this area. So before I move on, I wanted to do a brief recap because we've talked about a lot in just a few minutes. So a transit is really the shift and movement of celestial bodies, of planets, the moon, asteroids. And we review those personal transits through the lens of where the moon or planet returns to the exact degree. We really want specificity here. And it's the exact degree and the sign that it was captured in at the time of your birth. So again, for me, it's Pisces at the 8th degree. And for collective transits, we use the overall shift that that planet has as an opportunity to highlight the experience of the house that is activated in your birth chart, right? So when planets change signs, that's really when we want to look to see what the experience was we just had in that sign and what we anticipate the experience might be in the new zodiac sign it's in. And there are a ton of nuance in transits, but I really wanted you to have these key takeaways for today. So now that we've covered transits, I really wanted to move into aspects, which will cover squares and trines and a few others, right? And when you look at your birth chart, it can be a bit overwhelming. And if you haven't seen yours before, I highly recommend you do. There are a ton of free, great resources. Um, and when you look at it, it can almost seem like geometry hell, right? And I was that person that I loved algebra. Geometry was not for me. And so it took me a little bit as I was becoming an astrologer to really appreciate geometry, to appreciate the squares, the different degrees. And I don't want you to feel like you're in math class as I go through this section, kind of sweating it out and trying to figure it out. Um, but really, how I think about this is just like in photographs we take, right? Angles matter. And they are incredibly important as we look at the planets and really the relationship they have to each other in a chart. Learning and deeply understanding these angles is incredibly important to recognizing potential patterns from readings. And as I've spent time with dozens to probably upcoming on a couple hundred charts at this point. I mean, it just continues to grow. I can really start to see the patterns that people with similar birth charts, similar kind of aspects, things like that. And I can really start to see the trajectory of potential future events that could happen. And we also have a lens to review past circumstances. And that's not just my own kind of personal experience through reading charts. That's kind of the point of astrology, right? Is to really use the science and math behind it to use it and then apply a little bit of art, very, very small art. It's not intuition, it's really seeing the patterns and the layering that's happening. So to kick us off, we'll start with a conjecture. And for a conjuncture in the chart, the planets are within 0 to 8 degrees of each other, normally within the same sign, right? Again, there are 12 houses. We have 12 signs in the zodiac. We start with Aries, we end with Pisces. And so for this, the planets are very, very close to each other within 0 to 8 degrees. Because remember, if we're thinking from 0 to 30, that's very close. They're neighbors. And this close proximity means they almost can't escape each other, right? It feels a bit like kind of roommates in a house, where you're kind of bumping into each other naturally, no matter if you have different schedules and things like that. And sometimes that's incredibly helpful and supportive. For instance, if you have a conjunction with Venus and the moon in your chart, that could be really lovely energy. There's very complementary energy with both of these influences. There's an aspect of feminine energy, and they're very receptive. On kind of the other side of that, if you have a Sun and Mars conjunction, the energy could be a little bit more elevated, a little bit more initiatory, a little bit feisty, which could incite conflict. So we're starting with 0 to 8 degrees, and then we jump up to 60 degrees, and that's a sextile. And so when the celestial bodies are about 60 degrees apart, these are planets that are working in harmony with compatible elements. So, for example, sextile planets are either kind of paired, and that pairing is either earth and water, right? Very lovely energy together, or fire and air. Again, beautiful complementary energy. And that pairing is really, really helpful. And they naturally kind of get along and gravitate towards each other. And there's an easy exchange of energy, of influence within these pairs. And a sextile highlights which elements of your chart are really eager to work together and support each other, which we'd love to know, right? That's super, super helpful. For a square, this is a 90-degree aspect for two planets, which puts them at cross purposes, right? There is a natural friction that occurs, and there can be kind of immense challenge with this. And to work with a square is to notice the tension and the conflict before it boils over. The faster an imbalance is corrected or a sharp kind of change occurs, the more you can kind of work with the energy of the square to support and supercharge your growth, right? So that friction is really, really helpful because there's momentum behind it. There's an element that needs to shift and change. And ultimately, this is an opportunity through conflict, right? Through possibly even annoyance to grow and have rapid soul impacting growth. But it is a bit of a bumpy ride, and that's really, really good to acknowledge and know as you work with that energy. For a trine at 120 degrees is an aspect between celestial bodies. And the energy of a trine is very supportive and very, very easy, right? Even the word trine has like a lovely kind of chill vibe to it. And with this aspect, there is an innate understanding between the two planets. However, with ease, there is a lack of motivation, a lack of any force to kind of shift you out of your comfort zone, to shift you out of comfort and comfortability overall. And we don't want to fall into a comfortability that borders on being lazy with this aspect. So it's really important to understand how best to activate the energy in your chart when you have this aspect and to work with it. All right, so we've gone from 0 to 120 degrees, and we have just two more because I know that's a lot of math for first thing on a Monday morning. With our injunction or quincunx, the planets are 150 degrees away from each other. And there isn't a ton of overlap. There isn't a natural commonality through an element or a quality, and communication is a lot more challenging because of that. I think of this example as when a friend invites over one of their other friends to hang out with you, and it's a bit awkward. You don't really know maybe that new to you person's humor, and it's kind of work to connect with them, especially initially. And there's also this kind of feeling of obligation that isn't really helpful for naturally connecting with others. And that's kind of the energy we have here. And then finally, we are at opposition, where two planets are 180 degrees apart. And with this level of separation, the planets can actively work against each other. And there is a polarity of energy. And if you're approaching a problem, it's like seeing two very different approaches and having no clear way to integrate kind of the two approaches or take the best of like both ideas. There's a bit of a struggle to figure out like which path to go down. And so when you're working with this energy, you have to almost be a little bit like scientific in the approach to how you work with it, because if they're actively working against each other and there isn't a natural commonality, perhaps, or there's a bit of a shadow element, you really want to like feel into the energy separately and then try to see where their approaches, even if not conventionally have an overlap, you can see where the give and take is overall. Okay, so that is all the math. We literally just went from 0 to 180 degrees, which is so, so cool. But the key takeaway I wanted you to have from this section on aspects is to make the planets work for you. Do the work to understand where you need to influence your chart and have an awareness where friction can already exist in your placements. Your birth chart is personalized to you, and the makeup of the aspects in your chart are helpful guides to unlocking your next levels and growth in this lifetime. And ultimately, I want you to take advantage of the naturally supportive elements from the planet and also give a little shove to the planets that maybe are in less than helpful aspects that need encouragement to fall in line. All right, so I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on the astrological weather report, because there's a ton going on between now through end of year. So kick us off today, we have on November 25th, 2024, this evening at 9:42 p.m. EST, 6:42 p.m. PST, starts Mercury retrograde, which is a time of reflecting, reviewing, and redoing. And retrograde energy is the energy, especially in Mercury, it's really the energy from moving from a first draft to a second one, right? And of course, this transit can bring challenges in like with technology and communication. And as Mercury retrograde begins, the pre-shadow that kicked off this energy, that started November 7th, 2024, concludes. And the pre-shadow really gives like an appetizer, a preview of what the energy of this retrograde will be and a slowing down of the energy. And Mercury retrograde ends December 15th, and then we'll have 2 weeks post-shadow, right? So we'll have the pre-shadow, we'll have Mercury retrograde, and then we have the post-shadow. And all of this energy kind of highlights what's going to happen, the influence overall. So post-shadow is when Mercury is technically direct, right? And starting to inch forward, but it's before it really picks up speed. And this post-shadow concludes January 2nd. So the energy of the rest of the year will be influenced by this transit. Things are going to be much, much slower. And we've actually had a history where Mercury retrograde, typically we have three of them, three of these seasons. And over the past few years, it's been inching more and more into like having four of them. And I believe the past 2 or 3 years, we've had this energy of Mercury being in retrograde and that retrograde energy as we conclude the year, which is really, really fascinating how that kind of adds its own flavor to the season. Now, the energy this year will be different, right? The level of influence and impact of this transit is expanded, as there's a natural opposition to Mercury being in the sign of Sagittarius. And we talked about this a little bit, right? When I'm looking at a birth chart, I'm looking at the house it happens in, I'm looking at the sign that it's in, right, in the zodiac, and then I'm looking at the energy of the different planets and things like that. So Mercury has moved into the sign of Sagittarius, and the energy of Sagittarius is different than the previous kind of retrogrades we've had. The invitation and the ask, of Mercury in retrograde is to slow down. And Sagittarius has the energy of being full throttle, of impulsivity, of adventure, of fun. Sagittarius season is a season of like that we experience on a human collective level. It's the energy of parties and events, and it's the peak kind of holiday season that we have as we go into this part of the year. And this dynamic will be very different, as I expect a little bit more drama, or at least the flair for the dramatic, right? The astrological sign of Leo is our most dramatic, which I love. I'm a Leo rising, so I say that with all the love and affection in the world. But Sagittarius, they also love a little bit of drama. Both are fire signs, and there's a reason a lot of my really close friends are Sagittarius because they're a lot of fun to be around. And so I mention that because there's probably going to be even more in the news cycle or on the internet, or really kind of a ramp up during this time, and how it affects communication and travel and things. If you are traveling for the holidays, I really encourage you to find the humor in delays or being rerouted. And I know that's a really hard ask, right? This is very stressful time for a lot of people. There's a lot of different energies that maybe you have to experience, like family or, uh, friends of family that maybe aren't the easiest to get along with. But I really encourage you to find ways to share kindness and to show up for your community and fellow travelers as you can. The beauty and the gifts of Sagittarius are having a philosophical viewpoint and really seeing the best outcome, as well as having a positive attitude overall, right? Adventures rarely happen through planned journeys, and some of my best stories are times when my expectations and the reality of what I experienced were vastly different. Outside of Mercury being in retrograde, Mars will also be in retrograde December 6th in the fiery and dramatic sign of Leo, right? So I gave you a little bit about Leo previously, but the energy of this will be slightly different overall. So just like with Mercury retrogrades, there is a pre-shadow period that started October 4th. So we've been in this energy a little bit for a while. And Mars retrogrades are much longer and less frequent than Mercury retrogrades. And typically, Mars will shift into another sign, like it does when it moves into Cancer on January 6th. And then Mars stations direct on February 23rd, 2025. And it actually doesn't exit the post shadow of this retrograde cycle until May 2nd, 2025. So I know that was a lot of dates, but really the key element here is the start of the retrograde for Mars is December 6th, and we're really kind of staying in this type of energy with a little bit of a break here and there, but really the course of this energy doesn't end until May 2nd of next year. That's a while, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That can almost feel like forever right now. So there will be plenty of time for learning and lessons during this retrograde. Mars has the energy of a doer planet, and it's supportive and getting stuff done, and it provides very helpful motivation when it's direct. And when it's retrograde, it's super slow. It's a driver on a Sunday afternoon with nowhere to go and no urgency in getting there. And Leo energy is all about flair and being in the spotlight. And there can also be a level of vanity or a little bit of a minor obsession with appearance. Leos want to look good, feel good, and entertain, right? And so I would suggest that this time period is perhaps not the best to try bold new hair colors or experiment with cosmetic procedures. Healing during this time could be like physical healing of the body, could be very slow, or the outcome could be different than what you expected during this time. And while Mars is in Leo, I really encourage you to review where you share, shy away from, or hog the spotlight in your life, right? And we all do it. That is said with all love and no judgment. But I really encourage you to reflect on some places to switch that energy up and see if it's more effective for you. During the time that Mars is in Cancer, I really encourage you to monitor your own emotional equilibrium and where you might be avoiding conflict. There could be a boiling up of emotions if there aren't sufficient outlets to express it. I really recommend physical outlets for this, exercise, things like that. And for review, I would also look at where you can connect with others through their emotional needs and use that connection to achieve success on projects or business ventures during that time. All right, and I also wanted to discuss Pluto's move into Aquarius that happened on November 19th. So, gentle reminder, Pluto is a generational planet and it's very slow moving. I mentioned that the last long-term shift into a new sign was in 2008. The world in 2008 is vastly different from the world we have today. And I think we're still really working to understand and embody the themes from that time. With Pluto's slower pace, we have the space to really dig deep and unearth all of the hidden elements of what we're being asked to review. There's no stone left unturned during this last phase, and it'll last for like 19 years till 2043. And the energy of this transit is really the opportunity to reflect and have large-scale transformations in our communities and in the vision we are holding for what the world can be. The sign of Aquarius focus on how the talents of each individual can support the community. And this sign is very innovative and forward thinking, and there's an innate need to rebel against what isn't working. So, outside of working where this energy will be and is lighting up in my own birth chart, I'm really striving to hold the highest vision of what the world can become. I'm reflecting on how I can better show up for my community and use my individual talents to uplift others on a larger scale than I've envisioned before. And with any transit, there are gifts and shadows. There will be peaks and pits over the next 19 years. But I urge myself and I urge you to really reflect on how you're showing up in the world, especially in person interactions, and to dream big. Hold the vision for innovation and what the world could be. To wrap up this episode, I wanted to do a brief recap as I know we talked a lot. So, a transit focuses on the movement of celestial bodies, and we look at personal transits through the lens of where the planet or moon returns to the exact degree and the sign that it was captured at the time of your birth. For collective transits, we use the overall shift from planets that planets have as an opportunity to highlight the experience of the house that is activated for your birth chart. For squares, trines, and other aspects, math is key, and understanding the aspects of the planets that are really collaborative or combative is super helpful to knowing how to work with your chart and to reach the goals you have in this lifetime. Thank you so much for watching Musings and Modalities with me, your pragmatic shaman bestie. Tune in the second and fourth Mondays of each month at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for more fabulous episodes. If you haven't worked with me before, I do have my 90-minute astrology readings that use your birth time, place, and date and provide insights into your personalized blueprint into your past and future. I go through each of the 12 houses really in depthly to cover your planetary placements and how they work within your chart and life. I'll also share your upcoming personal transits and important days over the next year, as well as we can uncover your special gifts and talents. I also want to invite you to join more than 10,000 other lovely people, I'm so grateful for this, that make up the Facebook community for the Musings and Modalities page. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Musings and Modalities with me, Tristen, your pragmatic shaman bestie. For more powerful healing tools, join me every second and fourth Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. I cover a variety of topics to meet you wherever you are at on your spiritual journey. Learn techniques to work with pendulums, past life healing, astrology, and more. Please share the show and subscribe for more guidance from your pragmatic shaman bestie at musingsandmodalities.com.